Hello, and welcome once again to Loveland's Talking. I'm Andy Hiller. I'm the Public Information Officer here for the City of Loveland, and we're here today to share with you, the public, as we do every month, information about the City of Loveland government. Good hands, green lizards, quacking ducks, clerks with price tag guns. It seems like you can't watch TV for more than about 10 minutes before there's a commercial that comes on offering you a source for insurance. These folks want to help you manage your risk against unplanned and unwanted circumstances. So if you think insurance and risk management is complicated and difficult for your household, imagine what it's like doing that for the entire city. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We'll be discussing the city's insurance needs, some accident prevention, and some environmental risks as well. And with us today are the members of the Risk Management Office, the staff. Hi, folks. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Hello.
Brian, would you begin by introducing yourself?
I'm Brian Moore. I'm the safety coordinator here at the city.
And you've been here
Been here almost 10 years.
10 years. Wow, okay.
Seems like just yesterday.
It does, it does. Tracy?
Hi, I'm Tracy Turner-Naranjo. I facilitate and track environmental compliance within the city.
Have you been here as long as Brian?
A little bit longer, about
Really?
11 and a half years.
Okay, okay, all righty. And Betty?
Betty Greenberg, and I'm the risk manager, which means I'm the supervisor for these wonderful people.
Okay, and you've been here as long as them?
I've been here almost 15 years.
15 years, and you all still talking to each other after all this time? Smiling?
Absolutely.
Okay, good to know. Okay, well, let's begin with a bit about insurance. Now, typical household, there is often a building, the home to be insured, or if you're a renter, certainly the contents, a car, maybe two cars, and if you're lucky, maybe you have a little toy in the garage, a motorcycle or a skidoo or a snowmobile, that sort of thing. All those need insurance, and it seems just from a personal standpoint that can be pretty complicated. I imagine dealing with virtually anything and everything for an entire city government is far more complicated. We're going to talk about that in a couple of different ways, and let's begin with the fact that in a household, the average household has what, about 4 people in it. Our city household has, I think, in excess of 700 employees, and looking out for their health and well-being and insurance needs, so to speak, must be pretty involved. Tell us about workman's compensation and how that works.
Well, we provide workers' compensation, which covers medical and lost time for employees that are injured or get a work-related illness through the course and scope of their job here. So.
Okay, so if I work here and, well, let me ask you this, if I do something foolish that's my own darn fault, like tripping and falling down the stairs, is that covered by workman's comp?
It's a no-fault system, so, you don't have to, the city doesn't have to be, make you do something that you weren't liable for, look at that kind of issue. But not everything you do at work is always workers' comp. So
okay.
Sometimes, it's if they're looking at course and scope. So does it arise out of your job?
So I would imagine if I were using a tool, a saw, or something like that, or maybe driving in a city vehicle, that may be a little different, but using an injured myself, doing my normal daily task, as opposed to walking down the hall to get a drink of water, the former would certainly be covered.
Correct.
Okay? And how does that work?
Well, we have designated workers' comp providers. I tell people all the time that work comp is a lot like an old-style HMO. We have work comp doctors, so we give people the choice of one of 2 doctors.
I see.
They have to report the injury to us. They get to decide which doctor to go to. They go to the doctor lays out a course of treatment. Usually they're treated and released, and they go back to work.
And the workman's comp pays Pays for the
Pays them-
doctor and the
pays for the
stitches
doctor,
or
yep.
bandages or
Right.
whatever.
And if they actually are injured badly enough that they are going to lose time from work, then they get paid through workers' comp for that lost time as well.
Okay. Now, you guys can hear this. I don't know if, because you talk to me on a regular basis, my voice is a little different because I got a mean cold going on. I would assume workman's comp does not cover things like ordinary illness like that.
Correct, because you could have gotten it anywhere.
Okay, okay. What about if for some reason I got ill because of something that I was involved with the job? Would that be different?
Would be, but they need to know a source of the exposure. So let's say I'm a police officer and I'm arresting someone, and they know that that person that was being arrested had tuberculosis. Then, you know, you would go and get tested just to make sure you don't have anything now, and you might follow up testing to make sure you don't get anything, but they know where the source came from.
I got you. And that made me think that if I were a police officer, maybe a fire person who's going into a house full of smoke or where there's some sort of toxic material, that might be more appropriate for workman's comp than just catching a cold or flu on your own.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Well, Brian, I know one of the things that you do is to try and lighten the load on Betty and the people who deal with workman's comp claims by having people avoid claims and avoid getting hurt or ill to begin with. Give us an overview of that for a minute or two.
Well, a lot of what I try to do is, as you mentioned, is prevention. So prevention would entail the education and training employees with their safety issues, working with the supervisors and employees to identify hazards in their workplace so that they can avoid those hazards or reduce those hazards to a manageable level so they don't get hurt and miss work.
Not that there would be any hazards in our perfect city of Loveland here, government. Can you give me a couple of examples of things that you have identified and have corrected?
You know, we got such a variety of workforce here. We've got folks that are driving heavy equipment all over the city. We've got employees, our power line employees that are climbing poles and working with energized electrical lines. Our wastewater operation folks are getting into manholes. So there's a lot of hazards just involved in that, is climbing down into a sewer manhole with all the gases that come off of that.
I bet, yeah.
So,
And you personally don't, train people how to climb the poles or descend down into the manholes.
no, what I try to do is identify the safety aspects of that. You know, our power folks, those guys have been well trained in climbing the poles. They go through an extensive apprentice program, so they know how to work with the electrical stuff, know how to climb their poles. But if there's something out there that I see or identify, or they have an issue and they come to me and ask questions, I do the digging and the background work to help come up with a program, a policy, or a procedure, or new type of equipment that'll make their job safer.
Okay. Okay. And you're going to help me out with the word I'm looking for. Chairs that are specially fitted to
Office
become.
ergonomics.
Thank you very much. Okay. You're involved in that as well?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Explain that a little bit, please.
Well, what we try to do is educate the employees, especially the new employees that are coming onto the job, that we can fit you to your workstation. Okay, we can try to redesign the workstation if necessary. So I have on our city intranet site, we have an office comfort survey, so that if the employee's been here, a couple of weeks, they can sit down, they can fill out the survey, and they can kind of give me, without getting really specific, how they feel as they sit in their workstation. And they know after a couple of weeks, boy, this chair doesn't feel very comfortable, or my keyboard's too high, or my mouse just is too far away from me. So they contact me, I'll go out and take their measurements, do the assessment, and start redesigning their workstation from there.
So
If necessary, sometimes.
It's not just a matter of everything being convenient. It has to be physically comfortable as well, and not wind up spraining your wrist every time you go for the mouse button, that sort of thing.
Right. I like to use the word neutral, keeping everything close by, whether your arms are in a neutral posture, your shoulders at a neutral posture, your back and hips. So everything is supposed to be comfortable for you as you're sitting there.
That reminds me of that old joke I can't resist about, see if I can do this, a guy who I won't try, never mind. It has to do with a tailor in a bad suit, and the tailor just keeps asking him, well, one arm's longer than the other, so lean over a little bit more, like that, and one cuff is a little longer, so, and anyway, so he's walking in all, anything but neutral. Okay, I shouldn't even have gone down that road. All righty. Betty, let's talk a bit about hardware, as it were. Again, I mentioned the average folks have a car to insure, maybe a motorcycle or something like that. The city has more than a couple of cars and a Harley. I know there are dozens. You got a ballpark of how many different pieces of vehicles and equipment and that sort of thing to insure?
About 660, I'd say over 660 vehicles, trucks, which includes trucks, trailers, mobile equipment like graders, you know, those sorts of things. And that's not even beginning to track things like smaller lawnmowers and a lot of the tools and those sorts of things.
Wow.
So just large pieces of equipment and trailers.
And are they insured against damage like fender benders or theft or?
I would consider it catastrophic insurance if they all got wiped out.
Okay, I guess I don't follow. Would they all have to get wiped out simultaneously?
Just about because of the cost of, because of our deductible.
Ah, okay.
So.
And we're going to talk about that in a little more detail later. I can't help but ask, are things like police cars and fire trucks insured similar to the way I insure my personal vehicle? I mean, are they insured for fender benders and
Under our deductible,
Okay.
so.
And the cops never watch this. Do they have a higher accident rate than most of the other folks?
No,
Well, you have to say that, don't you?
they don't.
Really?
Yeah, they don't. They're pretty good.
Okay, well, after the show, can you tell me who's got the highest rate? Okay. That reminds me, Brian, I know I see, safe driving classes and special training for equipment drivers, that sort of thing. Is that part of what you do?
Yes, we do conduct a safe driving class for new employees and employees that have been in those fender benders in case they need to come back and get, what do I want to say, re-educated.
Now, is that for somebody who specifically drives a city vehicle, like a pickup with a logo on the side, or would it be somebody like the rest of us who on occasion have to drive to Fort Collins for a meeting, but we're using our own car?
We do it for both. If you're using your personal vehicle, but you're on city business, you're still covered under workers' compensation. So we still request that you go through the professional safe driving class. And our safe driving class is just it's a classroom setting. We're not teaching you how to drive, so hopefully you already know how to drive. You have a license, don't you?
Shh, don't tell.
All right. So if you do have a license, then you should be okay. What we try to do is reinforce our policies, our city policies with regard to driving, reporting of accidents. And one of the other nice features we have along with that class is we have a City of Loveland police officer that comes in and he gives his presentation about what he sees other folks doing out there that could get them tickets.
That wouldn't be Chuck by any chance, would it?
That would be Chuck.
That's Chuck. Folks, Chuck Hofkamp is well known around here. He's one of the traffic patrolmen, rides a police motorcycle, and if you ever are behind him, you can tell it's his motorcycle because the frame around his motorcycle plate, now this is on a police motorcycle, is something to the effect that, aren't you glad I'm in front of you rather than behind you? So.
He's got a famous saying that it's press hard, 5 copies.
Yeah, right, yeah. Okay, so we've talked about vehicles and equipment. What about buildings, structures, that sort of thing. Same thing with insurance. Say, we must have, I mean, this is City Hall, that's a big building, and it's pretty obvious. Are there a number of others?
We insure, probably a little bit over 100 structures, from everything from shelters at the parks to this building, wastewater treatment plants, the water treatment plant, and there's several buildings out there in some of these places. So we have a lot of buildings out there.
Okay, okay. Liability insurance. I know my homeowner's insurance, if Tracy comes over for a visit and I haven't done a good job shoveling the snow and she trips and falls and hurts herself, she can make a claim against my homeowner's insurance, my liability insurance. We have that sort of thing for the city, I presume, as well?
We do have liability insurance. One thing, though, is that the city, as all cities do in Colorado, enjoy some level of protection with Governmental Immunity Act. So not everything that might happen at your house would necessarily be covered here, but at the same point in time, we do have general liability insurance, just like your homeowners would, for things that the city is responsible for.
And I would imagine, in addition to me coming and hurting myself on city property, if Brian didn't do so well on his driver ed class, and as a city employee he hits me with a city vehicle, then there'd be some liability there as well.
Correct. We have auto liability, general liability. We carry police professional liability. Going back to your earlier comments about types of coverages that we have that your normal household would not need to worry about.
See, so police probably have a whole different layer of insurance than
Yep.
than the rest of us. Huh? Well, I know we did this show, I think it was the December show, and the subject was the snowplow effort here in town, and a new facet they've made. But anyway, then on occasion, the snowplow drivers will hit a mailbox or this, that, and the other, or perhaps even hit a parked car or not realize. And I guess that's not welcome, but that's just kind of the reality of that type of operation.
It happens.
Yeah, and you get claims for that on occasion?
Occasionally, yes,
Yeah.
we get those.
Okay. Don't tell the snowplow folks that I brought that up. Okay. Well, Tracy, I'm going to change the subject a bit and turn to you, and let's talk about environmental risk. I'm not sure what we're talking about here. Are you talking about things that the city might be doing that impact the environment, or things the city should not be doing that impact the environment? Give me a quick overview.
Both, in answer to your question. By nature of what the city does, we are very vulnerable potentially to non-compliant type situations with regard to environmental regulations. We have many aspects of our internal city organization. Betty mentioned a few of them, Brian's talked about a few of them. We have utilities. We have water, wastewater, power, stormwater. We have parks. We have streets. We have solid waste collection and a recycling program. We have fire and rescue, and we have police.
Yeah.
And those are just to name a few. And so within all of those operations, there is potentially an impact to the environment. And so what we try to do within risk is facilitate their compliance and track their compliance. We do that by trying to implement programs to assist them. Examples of these programs might include training, property surveys, property assessments, and sometimes remediations if needed.
Can you give me an example of some of the environmental hazards that may occur or we're trying to prevent?
Sure. More incidental type might be just by virtue of operation. We have vehicle maintenance. We have trucks on city streets. Sometimes a truck breaks down. Sometimes there are hydraulics associated with the truck. And so what you end up with are incidental spills.
I see.
And so we implement training to assist our employees in responding appropriately and per the regulation to handle those particular situations. Hopefully, we're creating and implementing programs so that we're more proactive as opposed to reactive. It's easier to train on perhaps how to not have that particular spill and things that you can do as opposed to cleaning it up.
So I would assume, like Brian, who needs to be well versed in safety operations for a variety of the different departments and the different things they do, you have to worry about the environmental concerns of all of those.
That's true. In my task with the city, I'm required to keep up with many environmental regulations and laws. Examples would be Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, hazardous materials, hazardous waste. I'm kind of simplifying the name here.
That's fine.
How we handle chemicals within our facilities, how we report the use of certain chemicals, and certainly how we clean up after we've had a spill of such chemicals.
See, okay. And Betty told me earlier that, explained to me that if indeed it's not, well, you're more interested in the city property and the actions of city employees, et cetera. If a new company is coming into town, and I'm not talking about a retail shop where it sells basketballs or something, but maybe there's an industrial component to this new business, and are you involved with learning about the new business to see if they're going to be putting off fumes or dirty water down the sewer, that sort of thing?
Not really. My task with the city is for our internal operations. And as Betty had mentioned earlier, or you mentioned, we've got 700 employees, we've got numerous operations, and we've kind of got our tentacles out in a lot of different places, and so that's quite a bit in and of itself. We're not worried about Joe's Texaco.
Okay, well, just so if Joe Texaco was doing something that wasn't quite welcome, it would be some other office or agency or outfit other than you, even though it takes place here in the city of Loveland, that would be involved with them.
That's correct. The one caveat obviously would be as if Joe's Texaco is impacting our city street and gasoline's going in the street. Or we do have a stormwater program. That's a newer regulation, and we have other employees internally who have a requirement to look more into illicit discharges from a Joe's Texaco.
I see. Okay. Okay. And what about if the city is growing a little bit? There's the city is going to annex some property so it becomes part of the city, or perhaps the city even is going to purchase a new piece of land for a park or a building or something like that. Is there anything that involves you with that?
Yes, we have an internal policy whereby any property that's going to be annexed, we would do a property assessment. In addition to that policy, we have a policy whereby anytime we are acquiring property for the city, we will do an assessment, kind of a due diligence to find out what that property is all about before we take ownership of it. After we take ownership of it, there's potentially increased liability if there is something wrong with that property environmentally.
So once it's our property,
It's our
problem.
problem.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that assessment, what types of things do you do on a piece of property before the city signs on the dotted line?
Well, for an environmental site assessment, we do follow an ASTM standard. Sorry.
Excuse me?
We follow a technical standard. Sorry
Thank you.
about that. And that technical standard requires us to go out and actually be on the property, review historical aspects of that property, look at properties surrounding that property to see how they might be impacting the property. It involves an interview with the property owner. It involves discussions with regulatory agencies to see if they know anything about that property with regard to environmental contamination or situations. And then we write up a report. The report identifies environmental conditions. And then with those environmental conditions, there's an associated risk. And so then the department that's purchasing or acquiring a property decides how significant is this risk? Do we need to do a little bit more due diligence to figure it out? Or, okay, we're satisfied with this level.
I see. And can you give me an example of some properties that have come about with significant risk or more than average, I should say?
Properties that we've acquired?
Mhm.
You know, honestly.
Maybe we've passed on them as a result, I don't know.
Well, honestly speaking, you know, Loveland is not an industrial city,
Right?
and so a lot of our properties are in pretty good shape. There may be incidents of past releases, maybe something like an old salvage yard, an old junkyard. We've kind of run into that before.
Uh-huh.
Relatively speaking, on a large scale, you know, it's not a Superfund site. It's a site that requires some remediation, and if we decide that we want the property, we'll either work with the property owner to establish that remediation prior to, or realize that that's a responsibility that we're going to take on if we acquire it.
I see. But the key is us doing our homework first so we know what we are getting or are not, no surprises.
Correct.
Okay, good. Okay, well, thanks. Well, I'm going to get back to a discussion about money. You were talking about deductibles. Money is always a fascinating thing to talk about. I bet our insurance bill is a lot more than what I pay for my home and car. But also I understand in order to minimize that, instead of a $500 or $250 or $1,000 deductible on a situation, your deductibles are a little higher. Can you give me some examples?
Yeah, deductibles are just a tad higher than that. For workers' comp and all of our liability coverages, we have a $200,000 per incident deductible.
Excuse me, for a moment there, I thought you said $200,000.
I did.
Oh, okay.
And for property, including auto physical damage, we have a $250,000 deductible.
Wow.
So we have very few vehicles that are worth more than $250,000. So for the most part, we're paying for the repairs for damaged vehicles and damaged property.
So when there is a damaged vehicle, in effect, instead of calling up the, what did I have here, the Good Hands or the Green Lizard folks, right, or whoever covers our insurance, and say, replace this car, we basically pay it out of the deductible. We eat the cost out of it.
Correct. We have internal procedures about, how to account for it, but yeah, we're paying it internally for things like that.
And on a given year, an average year, if there is such a thing, what might that total?
Well, for liability, it's probably in the, last couple of years it's been more like about $200,000 that we've paid out in, damages.
Okay. That's damages basically to people or other people's property,
And
not our own.
and some of it's our property.
Okay.
Where some people, when we look at things, we also try to collect from citizens when we know who they are who damage our property.
Right, go after their insurance
Go
company.
after their insurance
Okay.
company. Yeah.
All right. Speaking of insurance companies and lizards and things like that, we don't buy our insurance from one of those companies. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Where does it come
Well,
from?
Our workers' comp is with Pinnacle, which is the largest workers' comp carrier in Colorado. And
Well, the
then-
ones who've had all that good publicity lately.
Yes, the ones that have had good, I can't say that word either.
Okay.
We didn't go
Publicity.
golfing.
Pardon me?
We didn't go golfing.
Yeah, they didn't
Yeah.
take us golfing.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
But they've been very good to work with for us. They don't settle claims without talking to us. We know what's going on. They've been very good to work with. So we've enjoyed a pretty good relationship with them. For our property and liability coverages, we're with a pool of other municipalities within Colorado, where we, get together as a pool to buy insurance and large amounts of insurance. If you think about how much property they're buying for all these municipalities within the state.
So and the insurance, okay, all these municipalities kind of go in together and work with this agency.
Correct.
Okay. And I'm assuming that's it's done because it makes it less costly and easier, and there's some consistency among what we all do.
And yes, they know what the risks are because they're only dealing with governmental agencies. It works out well.
Specialists in the
They're
field.
specialists in the field, and they were doing this during the time in the 80s when insurance dried up for a lot of people, including governmental entities.
Really?
So that's when they got created, and it's sort of to provide insurance even in unstable markets.
So the assumption that I used to have about the city being, quote, self-insured is not the case.
Correct. It's technically, we have a large deductible.
Yeah,
but-
so, up to 200,000, we're more or less self-insured.
Right.
Okay, all right.
I
And
call it self-funded.
self-funded, okay, okay. Once in a while, somebody files a lawsuit, either with good reason or not, against the city, and you explained to me that that can be fairly expensive too if it's related to risk management.
Yes, most of our claims don't result in lawsuits. Most of them, if we're responsible for the damage, we're pretty good about getting it settled and moving on. Occasionally you run into, like you said, situations where either there's a disagreement or we really don't think that there's any validity to the other person's claim. And even when that's the case and we go to court and win, it can cost up to $100,000 to defend.
Why does it cost so much? I don't understand.
That's just time for the attorneys that get hired to do it. It's a lot of attorney time.
So we don't use our
No, in-house,
internal
no, we don't.
in-house
use-
staff for that?
No, they're busy enough as it is.
I see. So we go out and hire, I would imagine, attorneys that specialize in
In
whatever
whatever-
type of complaint it is.
Correct.
I see. Okay.
And at that point in time, if we do get a lawsuit, the city attorney's office does get involved and they do the litigation management. They
Okay.
sort of hand it over. It's like, oh, not my game anymore.
Okay, but they kind of oversee and make sure somebody is taking care of it.
And just, they're involved with the, intimately involved with the litigation.
Okay. Well, sports fans, we've covered a bit of ground here. Anything I missed that you want to share with the community? Anything special you want to mention before we call it a day? I'm seeing shakes instead of nods, so okay, I'll take my cue from you guys. Thanks for being here and doing this and explaining to the community some of the things that you do to reduce risk for all of us here and the city government specifically. I'll thank you folks especially for tuning in again and watching Loveland's Talking. We'll welcome you back next month. Until then, so long. Thanks.